for the Manitoba Heavy Association, and I'm delighted that you have found an opportunity to listen to 4 leading candidates speak to an issue which is pivotal, and that is growing the economy. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. I would like to acknowledge and very sincerely thank the sponsoring organizations of today's Mayoral Forum. It is brought to you listed in alphabetical order by the Business Council of Manitoba, Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Manitoba Division, Manitoba Heavy Construction Association, Manitoba Home Builders Association, Manitoba Trucking Association, Merit Contractors Association of Manitoba, Urban Development Institute, Winnipeg Construction Association, and the Winnipeg Regional Real Estate Board. A round of applause for the hosting organization. This is an exciting event. I know that we will have some hopefully challenging questions and some spirited responses. It is the only mayoral forum that focuses exclusively on what we believe to be the #1 priority of each and every level of government, and that is growing the economy. Without revenues generated by a growing economy, discussion around funding of all of our core services, cultural services, programs, etc., that the city and frankly every level of government deliver is moot. We have invited the 4 leading mayoral candidates as determined in a third-party poll released by Probe Research. They are, and please stand and remain standing as I call your name, again in alphabetical order. Scott Gillingham. Hold your applause. Scott Gill, I didn't say that, didn't I? Sorry. Bill, you're right. You can go ahead. Scott Gillingham, Kevin Pine, Sean Money, and Glenn Murray. And now a thunderous round of applause. Now, each of our guest speakers, candidates, will be given an opportunity at the start of the forum to self-introduce. We have come here this morning to hear their positions and ideas about growing Winnipeg's economy, and I certainly look forward to it, and I know you do as well. Now, I'd like to introduce and thank the moderators for our forum. The questions and format, while discussed with our moderators, was at the end of that discussion left in their capable hands to determine and assemble. The host group objective is that there is an open, unfettered opportunity to put questions to our 4 leading candidates. The questions that will be put to our candidates this morning have not been shared with any of the candidates in advance of this forum. Richard Cloutier, well known to all of us, is co-host of the News on 680 CJOB, senior reporter with Global News. He started in OB in December '92. That's a long time, Richard. Wow.
Yeah.
That's what, 30 years?
Coming up.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
Richard studied politics at the University of Manitoba and journalism at Carleton, and before joining CJOB, reported for newspapers in Ottawa and Hamilton. Now, I did say moderators, and you only see 1. I'd like to note publicly that Mary Agnes Welch of Probe Research was scheduled to co-moderate with Richard. Unfortunately, we were advised by Mary Agnes on Sunday evening and confirmed just this past Monday morning that she has COVID, and it's only for those reasons that she's unable to participate. However, we are very much indebted to Mary Agnes for the considerable work she did invest in shaping the format. And of course, we all wish her a speedy recovery. So Richard, it's left to you. Are you up to the task?
Absolutely not.
Good stuff. No pressure, ladies and gentlemen, Richard Cloutier.
Thank you. And I present to you in the audience my best side. We want to tell you a little bit first about how this event will go. We'll hear from the candidates directly. Each will have 3 minutes to introduce themselves to you. I have some questions. Each candidate will have a chance to respond. We'll have 2 minutes to do so. I'll rotate that starting order. I may ask a follow-up, but I will do this sparingly because the time is tight. We will have a 30-second warning paddle here, and we do have a 3-minute clock. First of all, we want to introduce our candidates in order. And I have here 4 pieces of paper with their names. And as you come forward, you can take, because positioning is always important here. I'll start by introducing each of the candidates, and then you start to my left here as far as the podiums are concerned. So this piece of paper has Kevin Klein on it. So right over there, sir. Absolutely. This next one is Scott Gillingham, right over here. This next one is Glenn Murray over here. And then, of course, Sean Loney over here. We welcome those who are listening and watching on our live stream. I will also tell the candidates at some point during the morning, you may end up on live television here as well, as there's some live listen and look-ins as well. So we have our introductory remarks. Is everybody ready? Have your waters? Yeah, no problem. Greg. And again, gentlemen, I thank you so very much for spending the time with us, and good luck in what I hope will be a spirited forum with lots of ideas. So based on that, let's now begin with our openings, and we'll have the candidates to my immediate left. Go ahead.
Right. First of all, good morning. It is a pleasure to see so many people here today to listen to this forum. This is a critical election in Winnipeg. It's a critical turning point for Winnipeg. I believe we need real change to address the issues that we're having in our city, the fractures that we're experiencing. I come to you after spending 4 years on city council, something I chose to do because I wanted to be internal. I wanted to see what the problems were internally and the division that we hear so much about. But I come from a very different background. I grew up under the poverty line with a single mom most of the time. My mom was murdered by her partner. So I understand what it feels like to be a victim of crime. I've spent a night or 2 in a Salvation Army shelter. I've been at the bottom. I understand how hard it is to work your way up and how important hope is and how important support is. My brothers and I'm very proud of, my brothers especially, but myself, I took to a career that led me to be one of the youngest publishers in Thompson newspaper history. I was a finalist in Canada's top 40 executives under 40. It's in the 90s. I was only 5 if you're doing any math. I went from there to work with Sun Media and other companies. I worked for some very powerful people in the business world here in Canada. Here, Carl Pelledo, as well as Conrad Black and others. This election is about who will keep you safe, who will tackle crime, who will ensure that your money is being spent properly. Who would you select to run your company? Who would you want to be responsible for safety on buses? Make sure that when your child or your elderly parents get on a bus, they're safe. Shelters are open and safe. This is an election about finding a proven leader. Somebody who knows how to direct people. Somebody who knows how to lead. Somebody who has the experience at a corporate level. That's me. I'm not ready to give up on Winnipeg. This city has so much potential. I saw it when I came here. And that's why I chose to live in Winnipeg. I want to unleash that potential. I want to correct the wrongs at City Hall and take us forward so that we have the best city in Western Canada, so that we are the gateway financially to Western Canada. Thank you.
Good morning, it's good to see everybody. I know this audience understands the importance of strategic investment for growth. We're in a time in Winnipeg where we cannot cut our way to prosperity. We cannot starve our way to growth and health. That's why I've made a commitment to invest in Winnipeg, because now's the time for us to invest in Winnipeg. As mayor, I will lead investments in our economy. I will lead investments to make sure that businesses grow here and can thrive here, so that new business can be attracted to our city. I will invest in our trade routes, extending Chief Peguis Trail and widening Keniston Boulevard so the trade flows faster and more efficiently. I will invest in Centerport, building on what I've already done, so that we make sure that pipes in the ground at Centerport to open those lands up to investment to create up to 16,000 jobs. I will invest in a cleaner and greener city. I will invest in crime prevention. I'll invest in the downtown so that our downtown is full of vibrancy with residents living in the downtown. I will invest in better public services to improve the services so that you as business owners have better service delivery for your businesses from the city of Winnipeg. But it takes revenue to invest. That's why I've already committed. I've costed out my platform, and yesterday I released the numbers. We need to raise revenue. And so I've committed to raising property taxes to 3.5% and a one-year raise of the frontage levy, $1.50, so that we can take those revenues and invest them in our city. Why invest? Because we need investment to build the kind of city I envision. A city that is safer, a city whose economy is strong and thriving, attracting business from other parts of Canada and even around the world. A city where we know the businesses here have an environment where they can expand and thrive and create jobs. A city where our kids move across the street to start their lives and not across the country to start their lives. We need that kind of investment. Now's the time to invest. I'm committed to making that investment. And now you understand that because of the world that you live in and the work that you do. I'm offering real leadership, real experience, and a real plan. And I won't quit until I see it through.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of you because you are the most important partners we have in city building. And I learned that when I was mayor. I bring the vision, experience, and track record that can make Winnipeg not just a great government for all of us and all of our businesses, not just an easy government to do business with, but the one that is known as the most innovative and progressive government in the country. I want to live in a place where everyone has a key to a safe place to live. That's a fundamental commitment we need to make to every citizen. I want a safe place to live, but we're not overwhelmed by problems of addiction and homelessness. I want a downtown that is so vibrant and so exciting that our tourism goes through the roof and our young people don't want to leave. We need to keep investing in things like the arenas, the waterfront, the forks, Red River College, the things that make it so exciting that we seem to have lost that sense of momentum and vision. I want to build on culture and arts and explore the exciting new opportunities that our treaties with First Nations people and the expression of our Indigenous people, including capital, following young Indigenous people into the city to create opportunities for all of us. I want a smart city that leads in the use of new technologies and software. I want a city that proactively addresses climate change, because through reducing our greenhouse gases and switching our fuels and materials, we can embrace opportunities of the province's bioeconomy. We are a city with electricity, nearby farms, with all the things that climate change is going to demand and all the opportunities that come with it. I want an economy built on urban and rural partnerships and a strong relationship with our provincial and federal government. I want a premier and a mayor who get along as we used to. I want a mayor who gets votes passed at council and who puts you at the center of decision-making in the city. I want to build the tax base, not the tax burden. And together, we can get Winnipeg back on track. Thank you.
Good morning. Winnipeg is stuck. You can see it as we move around the city. Human beings living in bus shelters. Employers looking for workers and lineups of people looking for work in the inner city. Record levels of police spending, and still we have crime problems. and our roads and other infrastructure in rough shape. Winnipeggers knowing that we can accomplish so much more. I'm proposing an ambitious, thoughtful, and frankly different way of doing things. While I have an MA in economics and experience as a senior civil servant, these were valuable experiences, but where I really started to learn was when I co-founded a nonprofit called Build in Winnipeg's inner city. And I have a story to tell you, and it is one hell of a story. Build does what I believe to be Winnipeg's defining issue, connecting the people who most need the work that most needs to be done. We're hiring gang members. It works very well. We've seen 8 years of City Hall to pass a social procurement policy. I want to employ those gang members, and I want them to be on your payrolls, because they make fantastic employees. They make amazing, considerable contributions to our society when given an opportunity to do so. And this is how we cut crime in the city. This is the kind of creative thinking that we need at City Hall. I've won a lot of business awards. Some people say I can't quite figure you out. Are you a business guy or are you a nonprofit guy? And the answer is yes. We need to do things differently here in the city. And if I'm mayor, that's what we'll set out to do. I'm the only candidate here, not from City Hall. And that's what we need right now. I'm the only candidate here that deeply knows the city the way it is today, and is backed by dozens of community and business leaders wanting to do things differently. If you look at my track record, you'll see I have the experience that Winnipeg needs now. And I lastly wanted to say, you deserve a candidate that can see our potential, the potential in each other, and that can recognize that the problems we're struggling with are really opportunities in disguise. Thank you.
Thank you all for your opening remarks. Those were 3 minutes. From here on in, we're looking at 2-minute responses, and if I so desire, a very quick follow-up. Candidates Glenn Murray, Scott Gillingham, Sean Loney, and Kevin Klein. So as far as our orders here, we're going to continue to rotate through down the line here as well. Winnipeg has really never had a focused long-term economic development plan. I think despite a fair bit of talk about growing to 1 million people in 20 or 30 years, what would you do? What is your economic development plan to grow Winnipeg's economy and its tax base? We'll begin with Mr. Gillingham.
It's impossible for the city of Winnipeg to operate in a silo. As mayor, I will do what I will continue to do the way I operate. I'm a collaborator. So to develop an economic plan for the city of Winnipeg necessitates that as mayor, I work with the people in this room, groups like Economic Development Winnipeg, groups like the province of Manitoba. The relationship between the mayor and the premier has got to improve. I'm committed to improving that, so that the city and the province can come into a mutual win-win scenario. Winnipeg is unique, as you know, across all of Canada. In every other province, there's at least 2 major urban centers that really help the economy. Winnipeg drives Manitoba's economy. So the relationship between the province of Manitoba and the city of Winnipeg is critical, because we have mutual opportunities to thrive in our economy. One of the things that I've committed to do is, as a mayor, the first order of business is to develop a strategic plan for the city of Winnipeg. That strategic plan would then lead into us adopting our next multi-year balanced budget, so that we can make sure that the budget funds the plan. In that plan has got to be a focus on economic development and growth. My last term of council, I went to the mayor and I said, we don't talk to the economic engine of our city. We don't talk to EDW and others enough. And so we put into place a regular reporting for economic development Winnipeg and other agencies, because the decision makers, the mayor and council, the decisions we make create the environment for growth. And that is the key. As mayor, I will work to create an environment for the economy to be strong, the environment for the economy to thrive.
Did you talk to the mayor in any other ways as far as that relationship with the province? You were there at successive city budgets, and clearly during the campaign, you said you're frustrated about that. What did you do at the time when you were the number 2 person there behind Brian Bowman?
One of the things I committed to doing, and I wrote it in an op-ed, is to establish working groups, working tables. So when it's not working between the mayor and the premier, there's another way to do it. And that's to maybe leave, you know, the mayor and the premier out of the room and get to the table, roll up our sleeves between the city and the province to solve our problems and seize our opportunities.
All right, Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much. Fundamentally, the role of the city in building a long-term strategy has to be that you're asking everything you're doing, is it building the tax base or is it building the tax burden? And you have to prioritize your expenditures along those lines. In fact, we had a plan. We had a plan that I reported to in every state of the city address I gave. Peter Squires was part of writing it. It was called the Homegrown Economic Development Plan, and it was recognized and copied across the country. It detailed infrastructure, labor, all the immigration policies. We introduced the refugee policy. It had a strong focus on downtown, and the sector that I've worked in for the last 5 years, where I've been building new companies in the ICT sector, it was innovation driven. One of the centerpieces of it was something that all of you, that Chris Lawrence and other people built. It was called the Strategic Infrastructure Reinvestment Policy. And we adapted under my leadership an implementation committee, which some of you were on. That as part of the fiscal management plan. Had we followed this plan that you and I wrote together, our reserves would be at 10%, our infrastructure liquidity would be way up, the city's net financial position would be way ahead, except right now we're $841 million poorer than we were 10 years ago, and we just broke our debt ceiling. We had a plan. It was a 15, 20-year plan. If you're going to have a plan, stick to it. City council hasn't been sticking to the official plan, Plan Winnipeg, Center Plan, or any of its economic development plans for over 10 years.
So is the solution then the Wayback Machine to the 1990s? They
No.
don't have all the plans?
It's the way forward machine. Why are we not using SaaS system? I work with 3 companies that use software as a service. We're in 35 cities in the US, 18 states. We can't even get in the door at City Hall. One of my sister companies, we would save about $1.8 million if the city would simply adopt software made in Winnipeg, bringing jobs to Winnipeg, that is used in Calgary, Vancouver, and Minneapolis. Our procurement policies are 50 years out of date. We don't buy innovation. We run away from innovation. We have it backwards. We need a forward-looking mayor who understands the conversion of the on-ground economy of what you build with the IT economy, because smart infrastructure is the integration of online and on-ground technologies. And we can do this together.
Mr. Murray, thank you so very much.
Thank
Mr.
you
Lundy,
very
go
much.
ahead.
I want to talk today about Winnipeg's biggest economic opportunity, and that is having a look at the $1.7 billion of fossil fuels that we import into the city on an annual basis. So Winnipeggers are spending more on fossil fuels than the entire operating budget of the city of Winnipeg. We've seen absolutely zero leadership on this issue coming out of City Hall in the last 8 years. I've announced ambitious, practical plans using creative financing tools, modern ways that other cities are engaging with Winnipeggers. A public EV charging system, so Winnipeggers feel comfortable buying and driving electric cars. And that also goes for commercial operations as well. The solar and heat pumps that Winnipeggers can adopt at no upfront cost. Modernizing our institutions such as Winnipeg Water, Waste, and Heat, where the utility can install the loop in the ground and Winnipeggers can get going, creating green jobs here locally with no upfront cost. I've also announced a very modern way of looking at transit called Metro Mobility, connecting what vans can do really well, picking people up on demand at a virtual bus stop, taking people either regionally or out to frequently moving, quickly arriving, made in Winnipeg electric bus, taking us where we need to go. And that will help resolve congestion on the streets as well. Winnipeggers will say, do I need a car? Do I need a second car? Because what Sean Loney is offering in Metro Mobility is better than a car in many ways.
So does that grow the economic base, Mr. Lundy?
I said 10 seconds there. Absolutely. So The report the city of Winnipeg received, the Community Energy Investment Roadmap, and listen to this number, 100,000 person years of employment. And this is how we keep young people in Winnipeg instead of them leaving for other jurisdictions, which is the case now.
Thank you. Mr. Klein?
Thank you very much. I guess what I'm hearing now is we need increased taxes. We're gonna increase taxes just for one time. And the last time I remember reading about that is when they brought in income tax to pay for World War I. And it hasn't gone away, it's only gone up. I find difficulty in having one special tax, because we have 2% of our taxes now that are designed to go to one area or two, and they didn't go there this year. They had to be used to address our budget shortfalls. So when it comes to spending, first of all, I think the very first thing we need to do is figure out whether or not we have a revenue problem or a spending problem at City Hall. Economic development is simple. I used to travel this country looking at properties to buy for one organization I was vice president of. If I was to arrive in Winnipeg today to buy an organization, I would have to do a risk assessment. I'd land at the Winnipeg airport, drive down Portage Main, always check out the downtown, and I would probably turn around and head back to the airport because the risk is high. You look at the insurance rate people have to pay to have a store downtown because of the glass breaking and the crime. We have to address the crime in our city. We have to address the homelessness in our city. Winnipeg has to become a city of choice. Paved roads are not safe roads. We do not get there by simply ignoring some of the major issues that happen. I've already announced that for economic development, I would create an Indigenous Economic Development Officer. There's so much opportunity to work together with the Indigenous communities that we need to find ways to bring people together. We need to create more economic Indigenous zones. And we can do that because it's successful in Edmonton. We can see companies outside of Indigenous communities now working in partnership with Indigenous communities, growing businesses. And that makes the Indigenous communities in our city sustainable. We have to build the platform, the foundation for businesses to come. So when someone comes here to open a business, sorry? Fine.
Thank you very much. The next set of questions, and I'll be very specific to each candidate here, goes to what you've all alluded to. And the city of Winnipeg, of course, is a $1.2 billion entity. And as mayor, you have the power of that office. What you do matters day to day, dealing with other levels of government, with leaders, with constituents, and with staff. This next question goes to that leadership, the judgment, the temperament, and the way you conduct yourself in those relationships. Because a key question over the next 3 weeks for voters is not just the promises in your policies, but about who Winnipeggers are elected. Mr. Murray, last Friday at a news conference regarding your sudden departure from the Pembina Institute in 2018, you said there was great change in your private life at the time, and quote, "It is clear that I allowed that pressure to spill over into my work life." You went on to say, quote, "that my leadership style and the way I worked was not a good fit with the culture of the organization." Mr. Murray, what is that leadership style? And if it didn't fit with the Pembina Institute, how would it fit with the city of Winnipeg in 2022?
I think people in Winnipeg know me very well. They saw me in office for 15 years. They saw me working with Premier Philman and Premier Dewar hand in glove. Positive relationships. I committed at the beginning that I would never have public fights with a premier, and I never did. Rather than yelling at each other, which in the case before and after, Premier Philman and Premier Dewar and I are good friends. I work very well with my council. There wasn't an on EPC, off EPC debate. We usually got 12 votes. I lost 1 vote over user pay garbage, the entire, almost of any consequence. I met with councillors, worked with them very, very carefully, very closely. They each gave me their 3 local priorities and 3 citywide priorities. We built that out into 4-year budgets. We made plans and we stuck to them. I was elected not once, not twice, but 3 times by all my peers, all the mayors of the 22 cities across Canada. When they had to pick who their leader was going to be, they picked me over and over again. As Hazel McCallion said, Glen Murray is the breath of fresh air that has put cities on the national agenda like they've never been before. I have my former chief of staff, I have Anita Stenning, the CAO, I have Paul Moist, all of you know the people I work with. I went to 90 community leaders before I ran for mayor, and I asked them all to help me. Some of you are in this room, and what did I say to you? Less concerned about whether you support me for mayor, it'd be great. But what I'm gonna need is your help on October 27th. We need a team because we do not have the capacity in city government to solve all our financial problems and challenges. As we did before when we working with Jane Jacobs and Richard Florida, we made Winnipeg the center of innovation and change.
And I'm not sure you answered the question, sir. I'm talking about temperament, the way you deal with relationships, and let's specifically talk about staff. You said you never had any public fights with anybody, but have you had those private staffs? And what have you learned from that experience at the Pembina Institute that in 2022 that you would apply now? Mr. Murray, I've known you for 30 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that you tell Winnipeggers that maybe you've changed. Maybe that was a one-off at Pembina.
I probably have one of the longest careers, and I've been CEO of private companies and public companies, and not everyone is a good fit. You take responsibility, which I have, for mistakes that you make. You also know when you come and go, and you work with people through that process. If you look at my 40-year career, it's been pretty stellar. I built a cap and trade system. Everything I've ever done has depended on human relationships. And Winnipeggers know me well. I've been, when I was there, I was out every night. I go to 3 or 4 events. I work 16-hour days, 14-hour days, 7 days a week. I have dealt with more crisis. My son committed suicide a few years ago. Yes, I've gone through some things that many people can't handle. I lost my son. I lost my mom. I'm tough. I don't bring my problems to work, but it doesn't mean that every job I've had in my life is a good fit, or there aren't people there that are going to be unhappy with change. I came in to create significant change in an organization that clearly didn't want it. I didn't stick around. I respectfully left mutually. And I learned with some humility that I'm not good at everything. And that sometimes you have to not do things that you're not good at. But I don't think too many people would argue that I was a pretty darn hardworking, good mayor who built great relationships and changed the discussion around cities, not just in Winnipeg, and built a pretty strong foundation for a few.
Mr. Murray, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clinton.
Mr. Loney, you did serve in government for Greg Sellinger, I do believe, and successive governments there. And you did start your own social enterprises that have employed marginalized populations. Ideas that in a city governed by contracts with unions, an entity created by an act of the Manitoba legislature, some of your ideas are just that. And I'd like to know, given the keys, what would you need to do to accomplish that mind shift, policy shift? What would be your message to your CAO? What would be the marching orders for the civil service as you go forward and hire, as you noted earlier, people that are have been oppressed, distressed, and who are criminals, very much like you did at Bill? How would you actually do that?
The first thing I think I want to say to administration and Winnipeggers is that most of our problems are not money problems. And if we're trying to solve them with money, you're going to see as one-off projects and just going back to the way we've been doing things for a long time. So yesterday, Councillor Klein was on CGOB and he said Winnipeg can't afford $100 million community housing land trust, which I have announced. It's just an example of an old way of thinking. The $100 million isn't taxpayer money. It's looking at investments in a different way. We're going to go to Winnipeggers and say, look, you're donating to the homelessness situation. We're going to give you an opportunity to invest in the community housing land trust. We'll give you a financial rate of return and a social rate of return. You can have your investment doing something right here in Winnipeg. We're going to go to places like the Winnipeg Foundation and say, look, you got $220 million invested in real estate. Good on you. Would you be interested in bringing some of that real estate money and investing in a community housing land trust? And City Hall does not get new ideas. And that's why I'm running for mayor. Because there's so many things that are innovative that work amazingly well. But if we're doubling down on the way we've been doing things, we're going to be where we are.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Klein, this morning you noted that you had worked for very powerful people. In your literature, you say you have corporate and business acumen. Yet on two different occasions in 2012 and 2014, you worked for firms with a connection to Peter Nygaard.
Yeah.
A man accused over the past few years of horrific sex crimes. You traveled to his island resort.
So,
And even were pictured playing poker with him.
Yeah.
You have answered questions saying other politicians and business leaders were also seen with him. Mr. Klein, I know many good citizens of Winnipeg in the business and political community, some of whom are in this room, who would not be seen with Peter Nygaard, would not have dealings with him, let alone go to his island resort, something that you said that you did not do. And they haven't done that, not for years, but for decades, or never. So my question to you is, in 2012 you did this, but again you decided in 2014. For someone that we are looking at giving the keys to at City Hall, how should we trust you? And the judgment that you employed, going back and working for him in 2014 after the experience in 2012.
Well, first of all, I'm sure that you're not trying to imply that if the president and CEO of a company or someone that was asked to leave a company that employs people, and in this case, over 5,000 people, are bad human beings, then all employees are bad human beings. I'm hoping that you're not trying to imply that. I worked for the gentleman. I would never work for him again. The other time of the very first job, I traveled with my wife. I've answered these questions for years. People have tried to throw this mud at me for years. I'm used to being bullied, so I'm happy to answer them. I left within 4 months because he's a terrible person. And I wouldn't suggest anybody work for him. But I didn't see anything illegal. I wasn't with him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
What did you learn from that experience, and how would you apply that to the job at City Hall?
You know, I learned what I should have. I didn't know about it when I went in there, but I do not like people that are tyrants. They're just mean people. They
So
don't
you
listen to
recognize
people.
one right off the top.
I recognized that in the first little while that I was with him, and that's what I left a job that paid over $300,000 a year, and I got to travel with my wife and didn't have one to go to at that time because I could not work for a human being like that who would yell at employees, who would not be suitable in public. I decided to leave that position because of those reasons, and I would never go back.
Mr. Gillingham, you've been a member of the past City Council, serving, I believe, for 5.5 years as Brian Bowman's finance chair, standing next to him on budget day. Now, this is a mayor who, in an interview with me, said, yeah, I purposely isolated and alienated many of the people in this room through impact fees, his refusal to meet with those who opposed his agenda. Do you have the skill to do the heavy lifting to deal with the inertia of some city departments, including property and development, right to the office of the chief administrative officer? I don't recall you saying anything when you were budget chair. As mayor, would you act differently, sir?
Yes, Brian Bowman and I are two different people, very different people. One of the first discussions that I would have as mayor, will have as mayor, is with our CEO to talk about the need for culture change. Someone asked me, well, who would lead the culture change from the mayor's office? I said, I would. That's got to be something the leader leads. It's got to be a change in culture to a yes first culture. We need to make sure that accountability mechanisms are in place. We haven't done that. We need to make sure that those accountability mechanisms are in place so that we can make sure we're holding staff to account, but also creating the environment for our public service to do a great job of serving you who are in this room and the people of Winnipeg. You know, Winnipeg's future is just too important right now. The decisions for tomorrow are too important to ask the people of Winnipeg to carry around a mayor's baggage of a lack of discretion and evidence of poor judgment. We need to make sure we're electing the right mayor, someone who can lead, can serve the people, can collaborate, the people of Winnipeg can have confidence in. And I promise to make those things happen and be that kind of leader.
Inertia at City Hall, how would you deal with it beyond conversation? Are you prepared to change it up? Are you prepared to tell people that their jobs are on the line?
I've already said that what we'll do, one of the things we'll do is look at reorganizing certain departments so that we get rid of the inertia and make sure we get faster, better customer service delivery, including faster and better permitting processes. I've talked to so many of you over the years in this room about what barriers there are that need to be removed so that we can create an environment where our economy can thrive and you can be successful. And I'm absolutely committed to making the changes that we need to make within our public service so that we can get better results.
Winnipeg is struggling with a deep and chronic poverty problem, a shortage of affordable housing, addictions, concerns about public safety. We'll begin with Mr. Loney on this round. What we're doing really isn't working in many of our opinions. What specifically would you do as mayor to reduce poverty in our city, including the provision of new affordable housing and substance abuse services?
So you're right, Richard, what we're doing now isn't working. I have a stat for you folks here in the room. City Hall has hired 916 new people since 1999. 87% of them went to emergency services. Almost half of our operating budget is now on emergency services. And so this is really critical that we start doing things very, very differently. And what I'm proposing is to modernize the relationship between emergency service providers and nonprofits. What that looks like is a simple three-step process. Number one, we're going to ask the police, will you please identify the people that you see all the time? No one does that. We think the police have phone 911 and they're asking us for help with the workload. They went out 240,000 times last year that we sent them out. Number two, to say to the police, invite them to say, will you tell us how much money are you spending in staff time responding to that group of people? And thirdly, sign an agreement with the nonprofit and agree to pay the nonprofit for the reduction in that workload. Somebody said to me, it's complicated. It's not complicated. It's different. It's actually very, very different. So that's one thing. That's how we address emergency services overspending. Number two, we're going to add 1,000 social enterprise jobs. And number three, I already talked about the community housing land trust. None of them are spending more money, but all of them are doing things differently. And I'm really excited about how great Winnipeg can be.
Do you like that Bloomberg Harvard model and the progress that has already been made towards that and changing the 911 service?
So what the Bloomberg model is sending someone other than a fully armed police officer out to a 911 call. It's okay. The real opportunity, Richard, is saying 240,000 police dispatches last year. Let's focus on reducing the number of police dispatches. I know how to do that. I've been doing that, and this is why I want to be mayor.
Mr. Klein.
Well, listen, I've heard everyone talk about all the changes that they can do to the police, and reducing calls. I've heard that police shouldn't be responding to certain calls and shouldn't respond to domestic violence calls that needs a social worker. Well, someone whose mother was murdered, I can tell you that's unacceptable. And someone who has been involved in law enforcement, I can tell you that one of the most dangerous calls is in fact domestic violence. And we've seen that throughout the country and the United States. I have to address some of the other comments. We really need to think about this election. We need to look at track records and not the promises and discussions that are had here. We have to consider the fact that I was the only councillor that voted no to promoting Michael Jack to CAO. And I stood my ground because that's what I believe. Colleagues all voted for that. My colleague on the stage voted not to allow councillors, all councillors, to be a part of the budget working process. How is that collaboration? How do we fix the problems in City Hall? How do we come out and make promises that today we know there's only so much you can do with the police service. There's only so much we can do. The inflation is driving prices up. More taxes will drive prices up. More frontage fee will drive prices up. I think that we have to be clear about this election. It's not about promises. It's about who can actually get the job done to get our city back on track. That's what I can do. I have that leadership record. I don't yell at staff. I don't yell at police officers. And I wouldn't quit on the city or any other job that I had to find a better one when working for people.
The question is to poverty and dealing with poverty, including affordable housing and substance abuse services, Mr. Gillingham.
One of the commitments I've made is that we will utilize the federal government's rapid housing initiative to build a modular housing to take more people off the street. We'll rezone 6 city Winnipeg surplus properties, build modular housing, work with third-party agencies to provide that housing and provide the wraparound services. Then we can go to a bus shelter and say, you can't stay here. We're not pushing you down to the next bus shelter or off to the riverbank, but come off the street into the housing where you can get the support and services you need. I've also committed to extending funding to 24/7 safe spaces that provide emergency shelter for people that are on the street right now. One of the things that we know the Belmas House does, for example, is provide emergency shelter for Indigenous women that are fleeing domestic violence. That's critical. Their funding was set to expire at the end of this year. I said we would make sure, as mayor, I would make sure it's extended all the way through to the end of my next term of council and add another 24/7 safe space. It's critical that we separate in our policing the calls for service that are policing calls for service and the social services, health-related calls for services. And by our own studies through the Bloomberg Harvard Initiative, we've determined over 50% of the calls that police respond to are not crime calls. They're social services calls. So we have to make sure we're working in partnership to get the right agencies responding to the right call for service. A couple of things I want to clarify, though, that are not facts that have been stated here. One, Mr. Murray stated that we've broken our debt ceiling. We have not. We're within our debt framework. We're still operating within our council adopted framework. And Mr. Klein indicated there was no collaboration for the last budget. That's not true. As I did as chair of finance, every time I met with all of my council colleagues asking for input into the budget. Regardless of who the budget working group was, I set up several meetings with each councillor each time.
Mr. Murray, the question goes to what would you specifically do as mayor to reduce poverty in Winnipeg, including the provision of new affordable housing and substance abuse services?
So we need to build thousands of affordable housing. Thousands of affordable housing units, and not just for people in crisis on the street. We've lost 88,000 people since 1975 from older neighborhoods. Let's say 50,000 of them are taxpayers. As Tim Sale said, when we and the then government of Gary Dewar ran the largest joint housing, provincial city housing program. Harry Lahotsky, within 5-6 years, had 200 houses in Spence neighborhood rehabilitated and brought on. Why did that work? Because it wasn't government top down. We worked with Peter Squires with the IHOP program. I wrote to Atlanta and Kansas City to raise money. Habitat for Humanity was a huge partner in that. We brought everyone together and created neighborhood housing plans over 10 years. And in William White, in Point Douglas, in Spence, we brought more housing back to market than we had before. That is important. Why? Because without sufficient housing, and I agree with some of Sean's suggestions, quite frankly, and I'd love to work with him on that. In addition to this, I've been meeting regularly in Zoom calls with all the CEOs of all the community health centers. They're saying to me, we have the answers. Mount Carmel, 9 Circles, K Clinic, all of them are ready to go. They're out there. What they don't have is enough money. And what they've told me really quickly is that there's 3 steps to this. The underpinning is housing, rapid access to detox, rapid access without a break to treatment and recovery, and then rapid access to replacement in the community. That's broken. Now you have to wait months. So it starts with massive investments in housing on the models that work and bringing new innovative models in that are being discussed here and meeting, and as long as you have to wait from detox to treatment, the system isn't going to work, and that doesn't work without a foundation on housing.
Very quick follow-up on that, because you have a provincial government that appreciates the issue but is not willing to go the nth degree on dealing with safe consumption sites, those types of things. What would you do to make sure that that happens as mayor?
You know, in my public life, I've taken lots of criticism, unfair and fair. I'm not afraid of tough decisions. It's leadership is about getting the tough things done. So when clean injection sites came up in Toronto, I was the MPP in my riding that took all of the residents associations on a walk and showed them all the unsafe injection sites where people in their back lanes were shooting up, no healthcare professionals present. And they got that, and we created safe injection sites instead. That turned the entire conversation in the community around. And even when the government that succeeded us canceled those programs, the neighborhood, the residents came back and said, we want the safe injection sites back. That is what leadership is. It's about temperament, it's about relationships, it's about patience, it's standing up for the right thing and getting people on board to make it the right thing.
I thank you all for that round of questioning. Let me just shift a little bit back more to dealing with one of the issues that we're here to deal with, and that goes to infrastructure. And how would you and your council tackle transportation infrastructure and that investment deficit that we see in the city of Winnipeg? How would you ensure that roads are fixed and maintained while setting out a strategy to ensure the transportation system serves the growth of Winnipeg's population and economy? And obviously here, we're not just talking about roads, we're talking about transportation infrastructure. We'll begin this round with Mr. Klein. Go ahead, sir.
So specifically, I want to make sure that I'm answering your entire question, and I want to unravel it. So allow me a second. You're just looking at how we're going to address the transportation infrastructure in the city or infrastructure as a whole.
You can answer it the way you want it.
All right, thank you. So I've met with organizations and I've met with others and those that work in the public service. And I've already committed $2 million to make an infrastructure plan. One of the things that we're missing at the city of Winnipeg is a foundation to work from. We're not putting together an infrastructure plan. We're putting together political promise plans or something that we think is the best place to go. It's not well thought out. We need to involve the private sector and we need to also work with our public service, but we need to put together a true infrastructure plan. And then we need to put in standard procedures for that work. We need to make sure that those procedures aren't changed halfway through the game, or that we're introducing new procedures that the industry can't accept. Infrastructure is always going to be a problem. I mean, it's always been a problem in Winnipeg, but we need to address it properly. And how you do that is by having an infrastructure plan. We have an active transportation plan, a parks plan. Infrastructure is key at our city. It's key. We have bridges that are close to failing. We have issues that we need to address according to priority. So that infrastructure plan will bring the priority and will give us standard procedures so everybody bidding on work and doing work knows what the rules are and can get the job done.
Would you go ahead with all 5 phases of bus rapid transit?
You know what, the very first thing I would do with bus transit is try to figure out how to get everybody to pay, because 5,000 people a day don't pay, and I would make it safe for people to use because people aren't using it because it's not safe. Let's fix the problem with that before we start investing into throwing millions of dollars at something that people aren't going to use or pay for.
Mr. Gillingham, the transportation infrastructure investment deficit.
Transportation and trade routes are critical to our economy. This is a meeting about the economy. You're here because you build our economy. And so that's why I've committed as mayor that we would take the next steps, including doing an ROI analysis on expanding Keniston Boulevard and widening it finally, which will also help as necessary, not only because the road is old, but because we need to make sure that it's expanded to accommodate the exciting new Indigenous-led development at Mayoral. For that development to thrive, it necessitates a good street in front of it. I've also committed to extending Chief Pegwitz Trail, which is also critical to moving our economy and moving goods around this city. And it's critical to opening up Centerport. Centerport stands and holds the promise of up to 16,000 jobs at full build out. It will maximize and seize the opportunity to have tri-modal transportation, critical, and it'll allow us to better compete with other regions. I'm also committed as a co-chair of the capital region for many, many years, committed to working regionally. We have to think bigger. We have to think regionally. We have to plan regionally. We have to invest regionally. We have to work regionally. So we're competing less against one another as municipalities and more against other regions across this nation and in fact around North America. And so I'm committed to making the investments in transportation infrastructure. Right now, we're in the midst of updating the transportation master plan. I know many of you, including members of the Manitoba Trucking Association, are giving voice to an input on that plan to make sure that our road system and our network and our transportation system that includes not only roads and transport vehicles, it includes buses, it even includes active transportation pathways that people rely upon. Making sure that that plan is such that it meets the needs of a growing city is critical, and I'm committed to fulfilling that plan and not quitting before it's done.
And if it's so critical as far as Centerport South is concerned, and you're an active progressive conservative, why couldn't you secure the announcement already from the provincial government for their commitment of Centerport South? Because right now it's the provincial government that's in the way. If you have the jam, why haven't you been able to deliver?
Been several conversations with the province of Manitoba, and in fact, what we did, one of the things that we did as a city is we made sure that we did an ROI analysis, and we showed the provincial and federal governments their return on investment. And so now, I mean, the evidence is right in front of them as the province of Manitoba that their return on investment is substantial. I made sure the city has its first 20 million in. I called upon the provincial and federal governments to make sure their 20 million's in, because it's they, at senior levels of government, that actually benefit more. And so I'll continue to make sure we get that done, so we get pipes in the ground and we open up Centerport.
It's still no announcement from those levels of government. Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cliche, and thank you to all of you who have been such strong advocates for better infrastructure policy and spending. I stand with you. We need to do a few things. I work in an area which models, and the software we do models the outcomes of different types of infrastructure investment. So we can distinguish between the things that we build that have an ROI, that grow the tax base, and those that don't. And that, from my perspective, whatever the project is, it should be prioritized. The things that build the tax base quickly are the basic infrastructure of Centerport. So you compare the performance of Rosser to the performance of the city of Winnipeg, and we're wondering why, if this was a priority for so long, it's sitting there undeveloped on our side and developed on the other, while we have a debt. When I was mayor, I had inherited an $800 million debt, and I left with $400 million. It's now 1.6. And I could understand it if some critical economic development priorities were met. The other problem is, it's not just about endlessly widening streets. Look at the 401 in Toronto if you think that's the ultimate solution. We do need more lane capacity, but it's protecting streets. We used to have a very effective regional truck routes that protected certain roads from residential infill development and certain types of retail. Route 90 was one of them. We built the Kenniston and the Waverly underpasses to make it sure it was an effective crosstown commuter route. If you try to make it the second largest retail sector, you have too many competing uses. So integrated land use and transportation planning, integrated rapid transit and road planning, and actually managing capacity and protecting the intent of routes, because it doesn't matter if you don't match your land use planning to your transportation planning, that creates a challenge. And we haven't done that. If you actually look at our planning process, we are way off our plan. The purposes of all of these roads that were built for efficient crosstown commuting have become the backbone streets for different types of development that undermine their intended purpose.
Mr. Loney, you have a different approach to infrastructure in the city of Winnipeg.
I sure do. 3 words: fix it first. We just simply cannot afford to continue to build new infrastructure. The evidence is absolutely everywhere, and I particularly want to talk about Kenniston. The congestion problem is a big issue, especially moving trucks and goods throughout the city. So we have to ask ourselves, instead of just going back to the old way of doing things and expand Kenniston, which is the least effective and most expensive way to relieve congestion. I want to ask Councillor Gillingham how he's ever going to convince the government of Canada, it's a key part of his plan, to cost share Keniston. Why would they double down on car culture when it's not the best way to go, number one? Number two, the feds have already rejected the idea twice. In 2015, the city submitted funding application to the Building Canada Fund. In 2018 to the National Trades Corridor Fund. The answer both times was a firm no. And I'd like to ask Councillor Gillingham today how he explains his plan, which relies on funding from the Government of Canada for expanding Keniston. It's equivalent to a 6.9% generational tax increase. 6.9.
Well, it does dovetail into my next question, and I would also remind people that are watching or listening in this room that, and certainly the frustration I get at 680 CJOB are people calling us or texting us safely, hopefully from the side of the road, about the traffic congestion on many of our highways, including Keniston Boulevard. But gentlemen, major Canadian cities are vigorously adopting programs to advance the green economy as responsible stewards of our economy and resources to attract businesses, new workers, residents, and certainly the whole idea of a whole lot more greener infrastructure. Briefly outline your ideas on Winnipeg opportunities to lead in the movement to the green economy, specifically electrification, greening of transportation, and ultimately industry. And we'll start with Mr. Gillingham on this round.
I'm committed to, first of all, to take our municipal accommodations department and convert it to a green power, green properties initiative, where we focus on retrofitting city buildings. We have many city buildings in our city portfolio. I've asked that we look at them and reduce them, but those that we keep need to be retrofitted. We'll also look at where appropriate solar power, converting to solar power, and even geothermal. I've also talked about and committed to purchasing our first 100 buses as part of the transit master plan, 100 electric buses. A master plan that Councillor Klein was the only one in City Council to reject a master plan for transit, which we need to make sure we can have a modern city with a modern transit service. The only one to reject it, quite remarkable. Now, the other commitment I've made also is to make sure that we are we're also doing a better job of our tree canopy and more investment in our parks. So we'll take, for every tree we have to cut down because of disease, we'll add 2. We'll make it easier for volunteers to plant trees to make sure that we're protecting our tree canopy, which is also very, very critical. I'll take an opportunity to respond to Mr. Loney's comment. In this room, you heard him say he will not invest in trade infrastructure. You've also heard him talk about there's not really a need to expand Keniston Boulevard. The federal government is the one that will stand to benefit the most, and the provincial government as well, from good trade routes, good trade movement in and around Winnipeg. The city will benefit, but so will the federal and provincial governments. As I've committed to do the same way we did with Centerport, the first thing we'll do is we'll get an update on the cost of estimates for Centerport, or pardon me, for Keniston and Chief, and then we'll do an ROI analysis as well and take that information to the federal governments and provincial governments and show their return on investment.
But Mr. Loney is essentially saying that this is a hollow promise because it's been rejected by the feds twice before, and that you can stand up in a room of friendlies and make that promise, but there's no way that you can actually fulfill that promise, Mr. Gillingham.
We have to look at how things have changed. Right now, we also have the proposed development, not proposed, the development that's about to come into place for now, Udina, an Indigenous-led economic development, which stands to really transform our city, and it'll be the biggest, largest Indigenous-led economic development zone in all of Canada. The federal government has an interest in that. They want that to succeed, and I think that alone will give them more impetus to participate.
All right, Mr. Murray.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Certainly
The
can.
debate I got
Absolutely.
about what they were talking about.
Major Canadian cities are vigorously adopting programs to advance the green economy as responsible stewards of our environment and resources to attract businesses, new workers, and residents. We would like you to briefly outline your ideas on Winnipeg's opportunities to lead in the movement to a green economy, specifically electrification and the greening of transportation and industry.
Thank you, Richard. That's what I thought we were talking about. So the biggest shift in the economy is going to result from climate change. And I was keynote speaker at a conference because of the work I did in Ontario. And in Switzerland, they believe that 50% of the change needed is going to be in materials, advanced complex materials, or biomaterials. The province has a strong biomaterials piece. The relationship between the city and rural areas and the farm and agricultural sector is critical in this area. In Airdrie, Alberta, there is a company that is making world-leading biomaterial-based building materials that use 40% of the cost and have an R factor of 40 of the most flexible design. I've been talking to them, working, I'm trying to get them to come to Winnipeg. Our company can't get in the door. All these guys are talking about innovation. If a city councilor showed up at our offices and asked for 2 or things, or when I go down there or even get sometimes letters written, we'd fall off. I mentioned recycling and recovery. One of the most important areas is we can't keep filling our landfills with valuable materials. Our diversion rates are terrible. We have a software company. Everyone's talking about the cost and affordability of rapid transit. The only person that went and spent a couple of days with New Flyer to figure out how to finance this and get private investment to the table was me. And the plan that I built was done with Paul Subri. The only one, and I haven't been at City Hall for 8 years. Where have they been? Why are all the exciting green ICT companies unable to sell? We need an innovation-based procurement policy. I will put that in place right away, and we will see Winnipeg businesses being showcased in city services.
Mr. Murray, thank you.
Thank you very much.
City Hall has been treating our carbon footprint like it's a problem and like we have to spend money to address it. And I'm here to tell you, it's not a problem. It's the biggest economic opportunity available to us in generations. And I've been doing this work already. I know how to get this done. I co-founded Build. We've insulated, lowered utility bills at 15,000 low-income households. I co-founded Aki Energy, which has installed $15 million worth of ground source heat pumps on First Nations, hiring Indigenous people to do the work. This is how we build our workforce. And my campaign is run by Jessica Floresco from Mother Earth Recycling. They're hiring people with barriers to employment to recycle mattresses. And imagine when we begin to convert our waste stream into jobs through recycling and lowering crime and other government costs all at the same time. And I also just wanted to briefly mention the tree trust that I announced. We have 30 organizations in Winnipeg right now, 30 battling, trying to keep our tree canopy. And this is something that we all hold dear. And for 8 years, we've seen City Council putting trees up against police budgets. And we have to fundamentally look at things differently. And the Tree Trust, building on successful models in Minneapolis and Cleveland, begins to see trees being used as infrastructure. And trees actually save taxpayers money. They don't cost taxpayers money. If you look at 2 streets, one that's well canopied and one that isn't, the city makes more money in taxes on the one that is well treated. And so we need to do things differently.
Mr. Loney, appreciate that. Thank you so very much.
Well, this is the difference, I think, clearly between me and others. We have to develop the city in a way that green businesses want to come here. The young people want to come here and establish businesses. It sounds more like to me that my colleague Glenn wants to just get his business work at City Hall. It's all talk about his software and such. I did not vote for the master transit plan. And let me tell you why. Because I'm sure all of you would feel the same as I. You basically have 4 days to review a document that has very little detail. It was over $500 million in spending with no sources of funding talked about. It was a plan, it was a rose-colored glass plan that didn't address the safety concerns in the city of Winnipeg for transit or why people weren't riding transit today. If you want me to vote on a $500 million investment on behalf of the citizens of Winnipeg when you know you're going to have to borrow all that money, I need the detail to make sure that I'm making the right decision. I voted no to a lot of those types of motions that came forward that Councillor Gillingham voted for. I voted no to a budget because there was a mathematical error in the transit department that was pointed out by several people. I voted no. I have put forward motions already to make sure that the city of Winnipeg adds 1,000 acres of green space and parkland, unanimously supported. We have to build the environment for businesses to flourish here. We can't invest into it ourselves. We need to work with private companies and give them a place where they can prosper, a place where it's easy to do business, and a place where their employees want to live.
Thank you so very much. Just picking up on some of the issues here, and I'm very interested in your thoughts. We kind of emerged some themes here, and we'll start this round, I believe, with Mr. Murray. Often I've described city councilors as at times having to be glorified 311 operators because people can't get satisfaction through that kind of one-touch system at City Hall. Do you believe City Hall right now is broken? And if so, can you give us specifics on what you believe needs fixing at City Hall? You had mentioned procurement earlier. What specifically do you believe is broken at City Hall?
The entire fundamentals have degraded over the years. Susan Thompson, to her credit, shifted power from the administration to city council. I have great benefit of inheriting her hard work. I think that shift has gone back the other way. We can't even develop a comprehensive safety system because we have a fairly dysfunctional police oversight body right now, but no one's in charge and everyone's in charge. But the first thing I proposed was a major governance review, which isn't really a review, but it's an action plan, and I'm going to be inviting some of you to be part of this, which is to look at the gaps between authority and responsibility, all the systems that aren't working. So people started coming to me who were sitting on bodies and saying they weren't working. So when Polly Craik and Anita Stenning and Ida Elbow and David Asper were on Center Venture, it was fully funded. It delivered 36 building renewals. It started rebuilding our downtown. Council gave it lots of authority and it has enough responsibility budget. Center Venture is a shell of itself, can't do very much. It has no budget. It can't administer programs anymore. We have a lot of people who, when I sit and meet with them, say it's great, we love being on Center Venture, but it can't do anything anymore. And that's true of so many parts of city government, including city council. Every councillor right now should not be a glorified 311 officer. They should have the proper resources and the power should be shifted back. In the first 6 months that I'm mayor, I'm going to do what I did last time, which is bring in an external review, ask the premier to appoint someone to this working group. And I want an actionable plan that all of you will support. All the 90 people that I met with, that I asked to support me as a condition of mayor, at least to support to work with me, I will put that in place. And we will go through the most significant restructuring of city government we've had since Susan Thompson was mayor.
You are aware, though, that there was a comprehensive review of City Hall governance and that it was parked until after the election.
It was not a comprehensive view. It was a fairly high level political review. It was not dealing with how we deal with all of the layers and duplication between different agencies. I work in this field. I'm on the downtown biz. It's a regular point of conversation that it's chaos down there. It's bike lanes, it's turning restrictions, it's parking rate increases.
Okay,
There's no coherence to this, and there's no governance process that you can hold anyone accountable to.
Mr. Loney, what would you do? Because I think that's fundamental to not just the day-to-day operations of City Hall, but that certainly is certainly the perception and in some cases the reality. What would you do about it?
I've written 4 books about reinventing the role of government. So there's a couple things that are relevant here. And when it comes to social issues, we need to see turning government from a funder into a customer. And governments value what they buy. They don't value what they fund in the same way. This is how we can resolve a lot of our social issues. I also want to take the approach where instead of going from government on out, we go from solutions on back. Because things change dramatically when that's the case. We begin to see, wow, supportive housing actually doesn't cost money. Because we can begin to connect to what City Hall is treating two completely different issues right now. One is emergency services spending, and the other one is homelessness. They see it as two issues. We need tools to connect those two issues together. We can resolve them both at the same time by connecting them together. Thirdly, I just wanted to talk about entrepreneurs, and this is really critical in how we reinvent government. These are people that I say are reinventing government from the inside. They're changing how government operates, and I've written extensively about this. Most of these entrepreneurs are women, and most of them are younger. And we need to train them up and to say, go for it. And the first place I want to turn loose is on the permitting department. So we can really, permits coming up quicker and faster and getting better results. And I note that my competitors, when they're looking to resolve an issue, they'll almost always say, well, we're gonna add more 311 officers, or we're gonna add more civil servants. And I just think we need to step back and say, how can we do this differently? And entrepreneurs are a critical part of that innovation process.
Mr. Klein, what is broken at City Hall and what would you do to fix it?
Well, how much time do I have? And well, this is why I'm here and this is why I'm running for mayor. There is no direction to leadership, none whatsoever. We don't do performance evaluations of our executive staff. I haven't seen objectives given to our executive staff or follow-ups in that direction. The culture of City Hall has been the same. It's a culture of complacency, a culture of they're only here for 4 years and then they're gone. We have to bring in accountability, and it doesn't have to be harsh. It doesn't have to be demanding. It's accountability so that you can work with the leaders in the department and make sure that the objectives that you want for the city, that the residents are telling you they want for the city, are being achieved. We have the EPC model, the only city in the country that has the EPC model, and a true leader doesn't have to select people and pay them more money to vote yes. A true leader lets everyone, every elected councillor represent their voters, because every ward, every councillor deserves a voice. That hasn't happened. When we vote on a budget, we don't get detail. At one time, I was, patronized a little bit. Well, we'll give you access to the GL accounts, which I never went on because I know what GL accounts are. I've done multi-million-dollar budgets. I know how to do a multi-million-dollar budget. And when you ask for questions, you don't get the answers, or they'll point to the last budget or something that they've published. We're being fed answers. You get one choice: vote for the budget or don't.
So what's the solution then? We're really good at outlining the problems, but what would you do? And someone from the business world, you do know what 30, 90, 120 day time periods are like. So what would you do in those first few months to shake it up and to fix it all?
Well, there's some things that have to shake up, but the very first thing we have to do is set the direction. We have to give direction. We have to tell the public service what we expect. Here's the objectives in the next 90 days. Here's the objectives in 120. Not get back to us with a report on it in 120 and wait another 180. We have to give direction as a leader. We have to be leaders of all accounts. Right now, we're cheerleaders for the public service. That has to stop.
So when WAPSO and their representatives say to you respectfully, Mr. Mayor, you can't do that. You can't treat us that way. How do you respond to that?
What way am I?
Well, you're saying you're expecting, and they're saying, well, we'll get to it.
Okay, well, I ran organizations that I've had to deal with: Teamsters, CEP, Unifor. You treat them respectfully. You don't write the demands and give them an hour. You treat them respectfully and say, this is what we expect from you for the job that you're getting paid to do. That's how we do that. But also, let me add what's most important is when we continuously communicate with them and we do reviews with them, they can tell us what the roadblocks are. And then it becomes the leader's job to get the roadblocks out of the way so they can accomplish the objectives that we're giving them. That is how you manage a city.
Gillingham.
First move I made when it comes, you mentioned 311. Make an investment in 311 so that our call wait times are not 40 minutes or 80 minutes, but down to 3 minutes once again. I said we make an investment for each year, adding more people to that department so that we can better serve you when you're making a call and your family members when they're making a call, so that we get better customer service. I also committed to reorganizing certain departments that are kind of forward facing to make sure that we have better customer service. And if we need to change it up, we'll change it up within the departments to make sure that we're getting the kind of service delivery that you and I and every other citizen of Winnipeg need. Mr. Klein indicated that he was given access to the general ledgers. He consistently said, look, I don't have enough detail. So early in the budget process for the last few years, we opened up the general ledgers and made it accessible to all city councilors during the budget process. You're not going to get much more detail than the general ledgers going line by line in each department if you want access to it. We also made a commitment that I had several meetings with each councilor, made them available to meet with our CFO and her staff so that they could get access to answers to any question that they had. We opened it wide to everyone in every councilor to give as much information as possible. And so councilors have the opportunity during the budget process to get all the information that they need.
Do you acknowledge that there are problems, though, if you have Councillor Klein and others saying that there really was a whole lot of kind of mayoral office secrecy there? What would you do to kind of open that up so you don't have a Councillor Klein saying, hey, what about us?
We have done a governance review. I supported it. Councillor Janice Luke's called for it. We started talking about it in my first term and I supported it and still support it. We've done the governance review. We don't need another study.
Mr. Murray, though, said it didn't follow.
Yeah,
It really doesn't
not
follow.
all, it'll make changes. One of the first commitments I made is that as mayor, the first thing we did, that we would do, as I said, we pull all councillors together, all, to develop a strategic plan. I would reduce the size of the executive policy committee by one and make sure that we don't add +2, making sure we don't add the deputy mayor and acting deputy mayor as part of the discussions. I also said that where there needs to be briefing, that we would have a clerk there always to record any changes or modifications within reports, and those would be publicly available. By reducing the executive policy committee to fewer people, it will force me as mayor to do what I enjoy doing and is natural for me anyways, and that's to collaborate and to work with everybody for the sake of building a stronger Winnipeg.
Mr. Murray, in your view, does that work?
No, look at how much has been stripped away. The planning department is operating at 40% capacity compared to cities. Our 311 service has 40% staffing levels. That didn't happen by accident. We have non-compliance with city council policies. We don't even build things the way that we want. There are so many layered zoning that some properties have 3 different contradictory building heights. Our downtown plan is 20 years out of date. Not one update was put. My business, my entire livelihood right now is in the Exchange District. Portage and Main was supposed to be the next precinct. Waterfront Drive worked. The Red River campus worked. The Shed District worked. And then they stopped that direction. So I always, when I do consulting work in cities, I stand at the intersection of the 2 high streets and I look at what's around there to tell whether city policies are working. Go to Portage and Main. I'll just give you 1 sec. The vacancy rates, the amount of undeveloped land with no buildings sitting on it is almost the highest of any Canadian, if not any North American city. And if you want to understand what's not working, look at why there is no major development going on right now on any parking lot adjacent to our 2 high streets.
Mr. Loney, do you agree with that assessment of Mr. Murray?
Actually, a fair bit of it for sure. I think we need to be more innovative in government. We need to really look at what works and double down on that. And I know with 311, a lot of the issues there are wages, and we need to increase wages to attract people and have them stay there. But just adding more people all the time isn't the solution. I think we need to look at the incoming calls and how can we be more effective rather than looking at being more efficient only. How can we be more effective and reduce the number of calls that are coming in?
And I'll stay with you on this as we approach.
I don't know if I can, because everyone talked about 311, and thank you very much. Everyone talked about 311 and putting more money in 311. We're not talking about putting more money to 911, but we're talking about putting more money to 311. Having more staff in there to answer calls, just to be told it's gonna take 10 years to fix the problem, is not fixing the problem. The problem is getting in there and directing the public service to do the work in a reasonable time. If you have a tree hanging over your driveway that might crush your car, being able to say we'll be out there by 2035 is not acceptable. I get the whole idea of under promise, over perform, but that is what has to be done. We as leaders have to change the policies and the direction.
That's a shot really at you, Gillingham.
Well, then I invite the others in this standing here to do what I did. And talk about the investments that will be made. And talk about how we're going to fund the plan. We can offer you a ton of promises up here. I'm the only one that is to say, here's the promises, including reducing the tree pruning cycle, improving 311. Here's how much it's going to cost, and here's how we're going to pay for it. I'm the only one that has done that. I'm offering a credible plan, a real plan to improve city services, and I challenge everyone else standing here with me to have the courage and offer to voters the courtesy of doing the same.
Well, I can do that.
I did, just.
Go ahead, Sean. I have no problem with this.
I wanted to commend Councillor Gillingham. He has put out a fully costed plan. He has said how he's gonna pay for it, and we will be doing that on Monday. It was a bold thing for him to do that and to go first, and I just wanted to recognize that I think that's important for the democratic process. He's also released a list of his top contributors, as have I, and I would challenge the other candidates here to release their donors and to release their fully costed platform by Monday. People are already voting, and it's time we get that transparency up and out there.
Well, mine was done at 0. And I've said that. I've said that we have to figure out if we have a spending problem or a revenue problem, and that's what I will do first. 4 years ago, I called for a zero-based budget review. Nobody on council wanted to do that. Too hard. Nobody does that. Calgary did it, saved over $500 million a year. It's on their website. Take a look at it. We need to know where every dollar is spent, because since way back in the day, when Murray was mayor, we've never looked at where the money's going. We just keep getting a budget that has very little detail, and we're shaking our heads and voting yes. So my platform is very clear. No new taxes until I determine specifically where the money is going and how it's being spent.
If only we had access to the general ledgers to see where the money's going.
Most people in the county know that that's not going to help you, especially if I gave them access to the city ledger.
I'm rather enjoying this, Mr. Murray.
Thank you. Yes. The most important quality of leadership is agility and inventiveness. So when I ran for mayor, I had a beautiful costed plan down to the dime. And it was built on reinvesting in hydro and that was about 30% of it. I get elected, then the NDP get elected, and they decide that they're going to appropriate the city's hydro utility, pulling out the largest part of my financial plan, which you all loved. Year 2, I lose my major source of revenue because Gary Dewar can pass in a moment without giving me anything and had to negotiate. We came back to the community, we rebuilt, we refocused. What I'm going to do is not just whip off something in an election. I will cost my plan. I'm going to take the entire first year to do what I did for mayor. I'm going to call all of you in because we all know the budget basically for next year is pretty much written. And we're going to write a long-term strategy. And I agree with some of the things that come from it. This plan that you helped write, the strategic investment plan, was followed by people like Marty Morantz from about 2014, 2015. We were building our stabilization reserve. We were achieving all of the long-term objectives.
Did you not only have as well, and I could be wrong here, a massive revenue from the payout, the transfer of the city pension fund to the city of Winnipeg? Did that not come forward to
Some of it did, and we had some huge challenges because you might remember.
Because it was in the millions of dollars that helped that
Yeah.
situation, wasn't
A bit, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think it was.
It wasn't more than about 1 or 2%.
it? Okay,
But let's-
so
Can
I'm gonna come back here.
I answer your question?
I'm gonna come back here now. We've
No,
got
but can I
one
just answer your question?
very quick.
Very quick. You gotta remember when the tech burst in the end of my first term as mayor, and a lot of our growth in the economy sunk. Remember the tech bubble burst?
Is that why you quit?
So that's when, That's when I ran and got the new deal for gas tax, which you didn't spend on roads.
I didn't approve the budget. I've been clear about
Yes,
it.
you famously say, you passed you tried to get 100 motions passed and you only got 3 passed. That's not, when I was on council, that was called failure.
Well, that's because the politics is like that, Glenn. I don't.
Failure is your style of politics.
To vote my way.
Well, then if you can't get anyone to, you only get people to support 3.
I got more than 3 motions for every.
That was your words, not mine, my friend.
And most of them were unanimous. Homes for Heroes, address the problem. 1,000 more acres, addresses the problem. We could do this all day, but I'm not gonna go back to my history from 1990 and tell you how great I was then.
No,
We're
we
talking
don't.
about problems
You know,
today.
leadership is not going back in ancient history and trying to blame it, say that the things that happened long ago are most responsible. Leadership is about plans for the next 8 years. You have it, and the plans that were in place weren't followed, and
Do you know how long I've been on council?
4 years.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Richard, there's something that's very important for people in this room, and that's finding workers. And I think we should have a discussion about how we go about doing that. Our population growth last year went down. It went down. And that's under leadership of city council. It's not COVID related. This started before COVID. So we need to really do a better job of attracting new Canadians to the city. Secondly, when at Build, we put out a job posting. This is one of the most exciting things I want to say to Winnipeg. There are people with significant barriers to employment lining up the length of this room looking for work. There are people in Winnipeg who need to work and have the ability to be able to work. We just have to go about doing things in a new way.
And I appreciate that and very spirited discussion. And I have one last question for you all. Didn't it feel good to kind of, have this kind of to and fro after all the forums that you've been at with all those candidates? I hope you're feeling good about yourselves here. In the end, though, the position of mayor, and I did address it a little bit earlier with some very specific questions, but this will also give you that opportunity to kind of wrap up as we go through this here. And I think we've heard kind of elements of your plan here as well, and we can certainly go online and get the specifics. But to me, a good leader sets and attains goals, listens, and inspires. How will your leadership style help inspire those around you to attain Winnipeg's goals? We'll begin with you, Mr. Long.
I am a big believer in social innovation, and we all know what technical innovation is. I was telling my kids the other day, remember when we used to go and rent movies? We're like, oh yeah, we used to go to the Blockbuster, and that was a result of a convergence of a bunch of things. This technical innovation that just took over the whole market penetration of streaming services. Well, I work in the social innovation field, and what's about to emerge, if we really want it here in Winnipeg, is a convergence of a whole bunch of things that can change our city and make us leaders, not just in Canada, but internationally. We have investors that are looking for not just a financial rate of return, but a social rate of return. We've got discussions nationally about reconciliation. What does that mean? I know what that means. It means connecting the people who most need the work with the work that most needs to be done. We have national discussions around how do we tackle climate change? What does that mean? It means it's not a problem. It's a massive economic opportunity, which we have not had available to us before. And we have young people that want to have jobs that connect to their values. These things and so much more are converging now, and they're available to us in Winnipeg. But we need leadership in order to get us where we need to go. And we have what we need. We need new tools to connect us, to connect what it is that we need to what it is that we have. Thank you.
Mr. Klein.
I know I look back at my history, and I didn't become a finalist in Canada's top 40 under 40 because I don't know how to lead. I wasn't granted senior executive positions, not of CEO and president. I'm not asked to sit on the board of directors of a medical research company in the United States because I don't know how to lead. We have to be the employer of choice. We want staff You have to have a good work environment where people are treated with respect. We have to be able to say, here's where we want to go, let's go together, and not, here's where we want to go, get it done. We need to listen to employees for ideas, allow them to be engaged, and reward them for their success. I'm hearing a lot about top-down management. You engage staff and you reward their success, they'll want to do better. They'll want to grow with you. I've spent a lot of years, and Richard would know this, as being a referee in chief and teaching a lot of young referees. One of my proudest moments is when I get an email from one of those referees that want a reference because they're getting accepted into the Asper School of Business. One just sent me one that's getting accepted into medical school. Wouldn't have called that. Wouldn't have called that one, but there he is. That's leadership, is being able to have your staff come back to you after you're gone, even when they're young, and say, I would like your endorsement to get this job or get this place at school. So let's get real leadership in there. Let's not talk about political aspirations or next steps in a political career. This is about changing the city of Winnipeg. It's a critical election. We need change, and we need real leadership. And that leadership starts at the top, but it works with those at the bottom and works its way up.
Thank you, Mr. Plant. Mr. Gillingham.
I'm humbled that 3 of my council colleagues have endorsed me for mayor. They're individuals that you in this room know well and you respect them. Janice Lutz, Jeff Rawati, Marcus Chambers. We had a rally the other day, and each one of them, I didn't know what they were going to say. They got up and they spoke at our campaign rally, and each one said the same thing. I'm supporting Scott because he listens and he collaborates and he leverages and utilizes the strengths of those around him to build a better community. That's the way I operate. That's the way I'll continue to operate, to provide the kind of leadership that will make sure we invest in this city. You've heard it from at least 2 of the individuals here today who said there'd be 0 investment, and someone else who said they won't invest in our trade routes, which move our economy. What no one has talked about, remarkably, is the fact that we have just come through a once-in-a-century pandemic. And we've just come through the snowiest winter, one of the snowiest winters on record, which became one of the costliest winters for the city of Winnipeg. Combined, the COVID impact and the snow clearing impact, is over $220 million on the city's finances. We went into the pandemic, thankfully, with a strong balance in our rainy day fund, our reserve. That's what it's there for, emergencies. We just had a once-in-a-century pandemic and one of the snowiest winters on record. The reserve operated as it should. And as we're coming out, I know there's still COVID, it's too bad Mary Agnes can't be here today, but we're mostly coming out of COVID-19. And I'm really pleased and proud to say that coming out of it, in this June, S&P gave us an increase, bumped up our credit rating, citing strong financial management. But we can't sit there. Now's the time to invest. Now's the time to build our city, to build a stronger city. Now's the time to grow our economy through strategic investment, and I'm committed to doing that.
Thank you. Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much. The world is changing quickly, and things are going to happen that come out of the blue. You got to be ready to lead and to be agile and to be a problem solver. I have 4 members of council who have endorsed and are supporting me. But more importantly, if you go to my website, you'll see a wide range of business leaders, people who have worked with me up close to deliver huge projects that seemed impossible, working with Gail Asper on the Human Rights Museum, before, during, and after. The chief of Peguis First Nation, Glenn Hudson. We've been working together because we have figured out ways where we can reignite and support an Indigenous Renaissance. I have a certain style of leadership that I think has always worked, and I learned it from Bill Norrie. And they used to joke about him at City Hall, saying, "Follow me, I'm right behind you." And I said to one of my colleagues on council at that time that kind of worked for you, didn't it? Because there was a big project in his ward, and Bill went and helped him get the votes, not taking any credit for it. When he needed a public ally, Bill stood beside him. When there was huge criticism, even from council, Bill Norrie stood up in front of him and took the heat for it. And when that big project got announced, Bill Norrie didn't show up and let the light shine on two councillors. That's the kind of leadership. As my mom says, if you don't worry about who gets credit for everything, you can get a lot more done. But you have to stick to plans. And if we had followed the strategic infrastructure investment plan and this the way that Marty Morantz and other people had, we would not be $841 million poorer than we were, and we have much better financial choices going forward. I am committed to getting Winnipeg back on track. And that starts with every single person, one fundamental basic human right, that everyone has a key to a safe place to call home at the end of the day. Thank you very much. God bless, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you all. We're going to bring up Chris Lawrence to say a formal thank you, but on my behalf, I'd like to thank you all for a very spirited discussion and also give you credit. You are standing there and standing at many forums like this, but also standing in a time where in some countries, democracy is threatened. And I'm hoping that you will continue to engage, continue to debate, continue to answer questions, not only during an election campaign, but after an election campaign. And I appreciate each and every one of you for coming forward, putting your name and standing and answering some pretty tough questions. And I thank you all. Thank you all for doing this.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think Richard put it eloquently. It's a challenge to run for public office. It's a challenge to hold public office. It takes great courage, commitment. And I think the candidates that appeared this morning have given us a tremendous choice, have given us an opportunity to greater insight into what they bring, what they would like to bring to the office of mayor, and what they would like to bring to the destination, to this city that we call home, Winnipeg. So once again, a big round of applause to the four. I'd also like to thank Richard Kluche for doing a masterful job in moderating the event and putting tough questions to each of our candidates. Richard, thank you very much. Good job. I know that Mary Welch would love to have been here. Unfortunately, COVID denied that opportunity. I also want to thank the sponsoring organizations, Brown Strain Business Council of Manitoba, Ron Kozlowski, Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters, Manitoba Home Builders and Urban Development Institute, Lanny McGuinness, Manitoba Trucking Association, Aaron Dolinik, Merit Contractors Association of Manitoba, Yvette Milner, Winnipeg Construction Association, Ron Hamley and Daryl Harrison, and the Winnipeg Regional Real Estate Board, Peter Squire. Big round of applause to these organizations who got together to be able to. And lastly, I want to thank each and every one of you. Each and every one of you are busy. You have priorities in your personal lives, but clearly democracy and the responsibility that democracy brings with it is something that is top of mind for you. So a very sincere thank you to having found the time and paid the entrance fee to come and listen to our candidates have questions put to them. Remember, October 26th is the big day. Remember to vote. We have choices, but we also have responsibilities. Thank you very much, everybody. Good morning.